The silent return. My daughter left for vacation and came back someone else. Chapter 1. The Promise of Summer. Denver, Colorado, 2024. The summer air, usually crisp and invigorating, hung heavy with a strange anticipation. My daughter, Lily, 14 years old and bursting with a vibrant, restless energy, was counting down the hours. Not to school ending, but to her therapeutic summer camp in rural Montana. I'm Sarah Peterson, a 42-year-old single mother, a freelance investigative journalist. My life revolved around facts, research, and uncovering truths. But with Lily, my heart was always the primary guide. She was a bright, creative, and fiercely independent girl, but the last year had been challenging. Puberty, social media pressures, and the lingering echoes of her father's departure 2 years prior had taken a toll. Lily, once an open book, had retreated behind a wall of sullen silences and defiant glares. Her grades plummeted. Her friendships became volatile, and she'd started experimenting with vaping. Small but unsettling, signs for a mother who knew her child inside out. My ex-husband, David, Lily's father, had been the one to push for the camp. "She needs discipline, Sarah," he'd insisted during one of our increasingly tense co-parenting calls. "Structure, a break from everything here." He'd found an advertisement online. Whispering Pines Wilderness Camp, reconnecting teens with nature, self-discipline, and purpose. It promised a transformative experience, a digital detox, and a return to core family values. The testimonials were glowing, filled with stories of troubled teens finding their way back. I was hesitant. Lily, despite her recent struggles, was not troubled. She was just a teenager navigating a difficult phase. The idea of sending her to a remote, isolated camp for 2 whole months filled me with a deep unease. My journalistic instincts, usually so sharp, were dulled by a mother's desperation to help her child. I researched Whispering Pines meticulously. Their website was professional, their staff bios impressive, their philosophy seemingly holistic and nurturing. They even had virtual tours of their rustic cabins and sprawling wilderness trails. It looked idyllic, in a rugged, back-to-basics way. Lily, surprisingly, seemed indifferent. "Whatever, Mom," she'd shrugged, her eyes glued to her phone screen. "As long as there's no homework." Her apathy, I reasoned, was perhaps a sign she needed this detox more than I knew. David, convinced this was the solution, had already paid the exorbitant fee. "It's an investment in her future, Sarah," he declared, cutting off any further debate. He always had a way of steamrolling my reservations with his unshakable conviction. The day of departure was a mix of emotions. Lily packed a small duffel bag, leaving her phone behind with a dramatic sigh. 2 months without TikTok, I'm going to die, she muttered, but there was a flicker of something almost like excitement in her eyes. Or perhaps it was just the thrill of escape. "I'll miss you, sweet pea." I hugged her tight at the airport, burying my face in her hair. It smelled of her favorite strawberry shampoo. Her embrace was brief, almost reluctant. Yeah, Mom. See ya." She pulled away, a flash of her usual teenage impatience. The camp counselor, a cheerful, robust woman named Brenda, with bright, overly enthusiastic eyes, met us at the gate. She had a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. "Don't you worry, Mrs. Peterson. We'll take wonderful care of Lily. She'll come back a changed young woman." A changed young woman. The phrase echoed in my mind as I watched Lily walk away, her slender figure disappearing into the crowd, a sense of foreboding settling in my stomach. I told myself it was just maternal anxiety. It was normal to worry. She was going to be fine. She was going to get the break she needed, find some clarity, and come back ready to tackle high school. Just 2 months. A summer adventure. The first few weeks were quiet. The camp had a strict no electronics policy for campers, but parents were allowed weekly, pre-scheduled phone calls. The calls were brief, tightly controlled. Lily's voice sounded distant, flat. "It's fine, Mom. We hike a lot, eat vegetables. It's fine." No enthusiasm, no complaints, just a curious flatness. When I pressed for details, she'd simply repeat, "It's fine," or "There's nothing to tell." Brenda, the counselor, would often interject, offering cheerful platitudes about Lily adjusting well and embracing the challenge. My journalistic instincts, which usually screamed at such vague, generic responses, were lulled by Brenda's calm, reassuring voice. I attributed Lily's subdued demeanor to the digital detox, the adjustment to a new environment, and her general teenage angst. Then the emails started. Not from Lily, but from the camp. Weekly progress reports, filled with corporate speak about progress benchmarks, emotional recalibration, and behavioral integration. They felt impersonal, generic. But nestled within them were photos of Lily. She was thinner, I noticed, and her usual vibrant glow seemed diminished. Her eyes, in the few photos where they were visible, held a peculiar blankness. A deep sense of unease began to gnaw at me. This wasn't the digital detox I'd envisioned. It felt clinical, cold. I tried to call the camp outside of the scheduled times. My calls went to voicemail. My emails went unanswered for days. When I finally reached someone, they were always polite but evasive. "Strict schedule, Mrs. Peterson. We're very busy ensuring every camper receives individual attention." My unease grew into a prickle of alarm. My instincts, finally, were screaming. This wasn't fine. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. 2 months stretched into an eternity. The last few phone calls with Lily were even more unsettling. Her voice was monotone, her responses rehearsed. She spoke in platitudes, repeating phrases from the camp's brochure. "I'm learning self-reliance, Mom. I'm finding my true self." It sounded like a script, not my rebellious, sarcastic Lily. The dread in my stomach grew into a cold, hard knot. I couldn't wait for her to come home. I needed to see her, to touch her, to hear her real voice again. The summer, which had promised a gentle reset, now felt like a long, agonizing nightmare, a countdown to a reunion I suddenly, desperately feared. Chapter 2: The Return of a Stranger. The day Lily was due to return felt like a lifetime of anticipation. I drove to Denver International Airport, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Anxiety, cold and sharp, coiled in my stomach. 2 months. 2 months since I'd last seen her vibrant, impatient self. I told myself it was just nerves. Just a mother's worry. The plane landed. Passengers began to disembark. I scanned the faces, searching for her familiar stride, her unruly blonde hair, her expressive eyes. And then I saw her, Lily. But it wasn't Lily, not truly. She walked off the gate with Brenda, the cheerful, overly enthusiastic camp counselor. Lily's shoulders were squared, her posture unnervingly perfect. Her blonde hair, usually a messy halo, was neatly pulled back in a severe ponytail. She was thinner, yes, but it was more than just physical. Her eyes, once pools of vibrant emotion, anger, joy, boredom, curiosity, were now flat, strangely vacant, They held no sparkle, no defiance, no familiar mischief. They were simply empty. "Lily, my darling!" I rushed forward, my arms outstretched, desperate for the familiar embrace. She didn't run into my arms. She didn't even smile. She simply stopped, her hands clasped loosely in front of her, a polite, almost practiced expression on her face. Her eyes met mine, but there was no recognition in them, no spark of the Lily I knew. It was like looking at a beautifully crafted doll, an imitation of my daughter. "Hello, Mother," she said, her voice soft, devoid of its usual teenage inflection. Her tone was unnervingly calm, almost robotic. My heart lurched. This wasn't my daughter's voice. Brenda stepped forward, her smile as wide and unsettling as ever. "Lily has made remarkable progress, Mrs. Peterson. She's truly found her center, embraced self-discipline." I barely heard her. My gaze was fixed on Lily. "Lily, are you okay? Are you really okay?" My voice was trembling. "I am well, Mother," she replied, her words precise, almost too perfect. Whispering Pines taught me invaluable lessons about resilience and emotional regulation. Emotional regulation, resilience. She sounded like she was reciting from a pamphlet. This was not my sarcastic, sometimes moody, often brilliant daughter. This was a stranger. The drive home was agony. I tried to engage her. "How was the hiking? Did you make any friends? What was your favorite part?" "It was productive." She responded to everything. I learned the importance of perseverance. My peers and I focused on mutual growth. Her answers were generic, rote, and utterly devoid of personal feeling. There was no mention of the landscape, no funny anecdotes about a clumsy counselor, no complaints about the food, nothing human. When we arrived home, she calmly walked inside, placed her duffel bag neatly by the door, and then went directly to her room. My heart was breaking. Her room, once a chaotic explosion of clothes, art supplies, and half-finished projects, was now meticulously tidy. Her bed was made with hospital corners. Her desk was cleared. It was pristine. Unnaturally so. "Lily," I called from the doorway, my voice cracking. Do you want to watch a movie? Or maybe we can order pizza?" "I will complete my evening reflection exercises first, Mother," she said, without turning around. "Afterwards, I will review my schedule for tomorrow." Schedule for tomorrow? My daughter, who thrived on spontaneity, who resisted any form of structured routine, now had a schedule? That night, I didn't sleep. I paced, my mind racing, a cold dread tightening its grip. This wasn't just a changed young woman. This was a completely different person inhabiting my daughter's body. What had they done to her at Whispering Pines? My journalist's instincts, now fully activated, screamed foul play. This wasn't just behavioral therapy. This felt like reprogramming. I needed to find out. Every fiber of my being, every ounce of my maternal instinct, told me something sinister had happened to my Lily. The silence in her room, once the quiet hum of a sleeping child, now felt like the profound, unsettling stillness of a void. My vibrant, rebellious Lily was gone, and a polite, empty shell had returned in her place. This wasn't a summer vacation. This was something far, far worse. Chapter 3. The Ghost in the Machine. The days that followed Lily's return were a living nightmare. The shell that inhabited my daughter's body moved through our home with chilling precision. She woke at 5 a.m., exercised rigorously, ate a precise, measured breakfast, and meticulously cleaned her room. Her responses were always polite, always generic, always devoid of genuine emotion. Her laughter, once a joyous, uninhibited sound, was now a quiet, almost forced chuckle that lasted exactly 2 seconds. My Lily, who loved to argue, to question, to challenge, was gone, replaced by an automaton. My ex-husband David, ever the optimist, dismissed my concerns. "She's just disciplined, Sarah. It's exactly what she needed. You always coddled her." His blindness fueled my frustration, hardening my resolve. He couldn't see past the superficial obedience. He couldn't feel the hollow echo where my daughter's spirit used to be. My journalistic instincts kicked into overdrive. I began to investigate Whispering Pines with a fervor born of desperation. Their website, once seemingly benign, now bristled with red flags. The language, so corporate and vague, hinted at a deeper, more manipulative agenda. The testimonials, once convincing, now sounded disturbingly similar, almost copy-pasted. I started with the camp's registration documents. Whispering Pines Wilderness Camp, LLC, registered in Delaware. A ghost address. No physical presence. This was a common tactic for shady corporations. The CEO was listed as a Dr. Elias Vance, a name that gave me a strange, unsettling jolt. It was the same last name as the doctor who had treated my grandmother, Clara May, in Boston. A coincidence? Or something more? I dismissed it as improbable. I dove into online forums, searching for reviews beyond the curated testimonials. It was difficult. Most parents, like David, seemed thrilled with the results. But slowly, painstakingly, I found whispers, a deleted Reddit thread, a blog post on a defunct site, comments from former staff members, anonymously detailing disturbing practices, sleep deprivation, forced labor, highly structured therapy sessions that felt more like interrogation, and a focus on breaking the child's spirit to rebuild it in the camp's image. Terms like thought reform and behavioral modification chilled me to the bone. My blood ran cold. This wasn't therapy. This was a cult, or something terrifyingly close. They hadn't just disciplined Lily, they had stripped her of her identity. They had erased her. I tried to talk to Lily about it, gently, carefully. "Lily, do you remember feeling angry at the camp, or sad?" "Those emotions were acknowledged and processed, Mother," she'd reply, her voice flat. "I learned to regulate my emotional responses." "But do you feel them now?" I pressed. She looked at me, her empty eyes unwavering. "Feelings are transient, Mother. Control is paramount." My heart shattered anew with each exchange. This wasn't my Lily, my vibrant, tempestuous Lily, who felt everything with an intensity that sometimes overwhelmed her, but always made her uniquely her. I reached out to the local authorities, Child Protective Services. They listened politely. But without concrete evidence of physical abuse, they were hesitant to act. Miss Peterson, a sympathetic but weary social worker, told me, "These tough love camps, as much as we dislike their methods, often operate in legal gray areas. Unless there's proof of immediate danger, our hands are tied." Proof. I needed proof. My journalistic instincts, sharpened by maternal desperation, told me I needed to go deeper. To find a former camper, someone who had experienced Whispering Pines and escaped with their mind intact. Someone who could provide concrete evidence. I spent sleepless nights poring over Lily's old social media accounts, searching for digital breadcrumbs, before the camp. She had been active on Instagram, following other teens, sharing her quirky art and rebellious thoughts. I found an old photo of her with a group of friends, tagged at a local art fair. One girl, Chloe, had vibrant pink hair and a fiercely independent look in her eyes. Lily had once mentioned Chloe was a bit of a rebel. Maybe she hadn't gone to Whispering Pines. Maybe she knew someone who had. I found Chloe's contact information through an old group chat Lily was in. I sent her a cautious message, introducing myself, expressing my concern for Lily, and hinting at my fears about Whispering Pines. I waited, heart pounding. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. A message from Chloe. "Miss Peterson, I know this sounds crazy, but I think Lily needs help. My friend Alex went to Whispering Pines last year. He came back different, like a zombie. His parents loved it, but he told me things, horrible things. He called it the re-education camp." A cold shiver ran down my spine. The re-education camp. My instincts had been right. This was far more sinister than I had imagined. Chloe agreed to meet me. She had saved some of Alex's fragmented, terrified messages from before his memory, his personality, had seemingly been erased. This was the proof I needed. The ghost in the machine wasn't just Lily. It was the insidious force that had stolen her and countless others. Chapter 4. The Unraveling Thread. Chloe's words confirmed my worst fears. The re-education camp, the chilling nickname for Whispering Pines, resonated with the metallic taste of dread in my mouth. My journalistic rigor, honed by years of uncovering hidden truths, merged with a mother's desperate ferocity. I was no longer just investigating. I was fighting for my daughter's soul. Chloe, a perceptive and empathetic teenager, met me at a quiet coffee shop in Boulder, Colorado, where she now lived with her aunt. She seemed wary at first, almost fearful, but her concern for Lily and for her friend Alex outweighed her apprehension. She showed me the fragmented messages from Alex, terrified, disjointed texts sent in secret, detailing forced confessions, psychological manipulation, and a grueling daily regimen designed to break down individuality. He spoke of the sessions where campers were isolated and subjected to repetitive questioning, forced to admit faults and deviant behaviors. He mentioned constant surveillance, a severe lack of privacy, and a pervasive atmosphere of fear. "They want to erase who you are, Chloe," one text read, "and replace it with what they want you to be." His messages abruptly stopped after a few weeks. When he returned, he was, as Chloe described, a different person, polite, emotionless, and eerily compliant. My hands trembled as I read them. This was the concrete evidence I needed. This wasn't just a tough love camp. This was a coercive control operation, a sophisticated form of psychological torture. Alex mentioned a specific person, Chloe whispered, her eyes wide. He called him the director, a really intimidating guy. Alex said he knew everything about everyone, like he could read minds. His name was Dr. Vance. Dr. Vance, the name again. My blood ran cold. Elias Vance, the same last name as the doctor from my grandmother's story, the one who had helped her keep her secret for 40 years. It had been an unsettling coincidence then. Now, it felt like a terrifying thread, connecting two disparate parts of my life in a way I couldn't yet comprehend. Was it merely a shared surname, or was there a deeper, more insidious connection? My journalistic mind insisted on following every lead, no matter how improbable. I decided to start with Dr. Elias Vance. I ran his name through every professional database, every public record I could access. He was a licensed psychologist, a former university professor specializing in behavioral modification. His early career, surprisingly, involved research into treating trauma and PTSD, but then a distinct shift. His publications became more focused on repatterning and restructuring unwanted behaviors. He had a private practice in Phoenix, Arizona, before the establishment of Whispering Pines, a very private practice, with no reviews, no testimonials, nothing but a P.O. box. I found an old academic paper of his, published decades ago, about cognitive restructuring techniques. It was dense, filled with jargon, but one phrase leaped out at me. The human mind, when subjected to structured repatterning, can achieve profound, lasting behavioral recalibration. The chilling echoes of Lily's robotic answers sent a shiver down my spine. This man wasn't healing, he was engineering. My next step was to contact a former employee of Whispering Pines, someone Chloe had heard about, a young woman named Maya, who had worked as a junior counselor for a few months before quitting abruptly. Chloe had heard Maya had been deeply disturbed by the camp's practices. Maya was harder to track down. She had moved several times since leaving the camp, seemingly trying to disappear. But my investigative skills were relentless. I eventually found her working at a small community garden in Portland, Oregon. I called her, carefully introducing myself, explaining my situation with Lily, mentioning Alex, and then Whispering Pines. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a hesitant, "You know about the reset?" "The reset?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "That's what they called it internally," Maya explained, her voice low and tight with barely suppressed emotion. It was Dr. Vance's term. He believed he could reset a child's mind, erase their undesirable traits, and implant new, positive ones. It was horrifying. They used isolation, sleep deprivation, constant monitoring. They would replay audio recordings of the children's confessions and bad behavior over and over, sometimes for hours, until the kids broke down. Then they'd start the repatterning, feeding them positive affirmations and new narratives about themselves, about their behavior. It was brainwashing, pure and simple. My stomach churned. This confirmed everything, every chilling instinct I'd had. Maya agreed to provide a sworn affidavit detailing the camp's abusive practices. She had photos, too, taken secretly on her phone. Blurry images of kids looking gaunt and hollow-eyed, of isolation rooms, of counselors delivering affirmations with unsettling intensity. "But Mrs. Peterson," Maya said, her voice dropping, "there's something else. Dr. Vance, he wasn't just a clinical psychologist. He was obsessed with something he called the legacy. He had a collection of old documents, letters, journals. He'd often disappear into his office for hours, poring over them, muttering about the true potential of the mind and erasing past failures." "What kind of documents?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Old family stuff, I think," Maya replied. "He had a specific locket he always wore, a silver one, and he'd sometimes talk about a woman named Clara May. He seemed to think she was some kind of genius or a warning. Clara May, my grandmother, the locket, the compass rose. My mind reeled. The pieces were starting to connect, forming a terrifying mosaic. Dr. Elias Vance was not just a random coincidence. He was related to my grandmother, perhaps a descendant of her secret past, the one she had entrusted to me. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. This was about family, my family, and a hidden, perhaps sinister, legacy that transcended generations. My grandmother's truth, it seemed, had a dark, twisted counterpart. Chapter 5: The Web of Deceit. The connection was undeniable, chilling. Dr. Elias Vance, the architect of Whispering Pines' insidious re-education, was somehow linked to my grandmother, Clara May. His obsession with the legacy and erasing past failures felt like a sinister inversion of Clara May's quest for hidden truths and acceptance. My journalistic pursuit had become intensely personal, weaving together the present horror of Lily's altered state with the echoes of a past I had only just begun to understand. I called Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, my grandmother's niece, and the keeper of our family's more conventional history. "Aunt Susan," I began, trying to keep my voice calm, "do you know anything about a Dr. Elias Vance? Any connection to our family?" There was a long pause. "Elias Vance?" she repeated, her voice hesitant. "Well, yes, he's Eleanor's cousin, technically. Your mother's cousin. Clara May's. He's the son of Clara May's brother, Arthur. He's always been a bit eccentric, brilliant but odd, a recluse. Why do you ask?" Arthur, Clara May's brother, who my grandmother rarely spoke of, always with a faint, uneasy expression. The brother who, in her journal, she had only obliquely referenced as being involved in the discretion surrounding her firstborn. Could he have been the family member who intercepted Liam's letters? The one who ensured my mother, Eleanor, was raised as her niece? The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying inevitability. Arthur, driven by a rigid sense of family honor and societal propriety, had silenced Clara May's truth, and now his son Elias was carrying on a twisted version of that control. Erasing past failures was not just a psychological theory. It was a family creed. "Aunt Susan," I said, my voice tight with urgency, "I need everything you know about Arthur, about Elias Vance. Everything." Aunt Susan, sensing the gravity in my tone, opened up. Arthur, she revealed, had been fiercely protective of the family name, obsessed with upholding a pristine image in Savannah society. He saw Clara May's youthful romance with Liam as a catastrophic threat to their standing. He had indeed been the one to intercept Liam's letters, convincing his sister that Liam had abandoned her. He also orchestrated the secret adoption of my mother, Eleanor, by his own childless sister, creating a fabricated narrative to protect the family's reputation. He had effectively erased Clara May's first love and first child from the official family record. Elias, his son, had inherited his father's rigid views, but amplified them with a chilling academic veneer. He believed that unruly emotions and deviant behaviors were weaknesses, failures that could be systematically corrected. He admired his father's ability to control and suppress undesirable truths within the family, and he applied that same philosophy on a grander scale in his camps. The silver locket Maya mentioned that Elias Vance wore was likely the very same locket that Liam had given Clara May, a tangible symbol of the truth his father had sought to erase. Elias, rather than accepting Clara May's story as a testament to love and resilience, saw it as a blueprint for control. He viewed her as a failed attempt at family control, a source of undesirable emotions that needed to be managed. He built Whispering Pines as his grand experiment, Olivia, Aunt Susan concluded, her voice laced with a mixture of disgust and sorrow. He believed he could create perfect children, free of emotional imperfections. He always talked about restoring order to the modern youth, fixing the damage done by lax parenting. It was a family legacy, twisted into something monstrous. Arthur had controlled Clara May's narrative. Elias was controlling the narratives of countless children. My Lily was merely his latest victim. Armed with Maya's affidavit, Alex's messages, and now the chilling familial connection to Elias Vance, I contacted a pro bono legal aid organization specializing in child rights. Their lawyers were appalled by the evidence. This was more than just a tough love camp. It was a clear case of child psychological abuse and potentially unlawful detention. The legal team moved swiftly, initiating a multi-state investigation into Whispering Pines. They identified other families with similar stories, other transformed children, whose parents, like David, were either oblivious or willfully blind to the subtle horror that had befallen their kids. My story, amplified by Maya's insider account and the pattern of similar cases, gained traction. But I knew legal action would be slow, protracted. Lily was suffering now. I needed to bring her back, to heal her. I approached Lily again, gently, carrying the wooden box filled with Clara May's journal and Liam's letters. "Lily," I said, my voice soft but firm, "I want to tell you a story. Our story. A true story about bravery and secrets." I started with Clara May, her youthful love for Liam, the promise of the compass rose. I watched Lily's face carefully, searching for any flicker of recognition, any spark of emotion. Her eyes remained blank, but I continued, unwavering. I told her about the intercepted letters, the sacrifice Clara May made to protect her, about Eleanor, my mother, being Clara May's daughter. I told her about the decades of hidden love and how Clara May finally chose to reveal her truth. Then I spoke about Elias Vance, his obsession with erasing failures, and how he had twisted his own family history into a justification for his abusive practices. "He tried to erase your true self, Lily," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Just like his father tried to erase a part of our grandmother's story. But he can't. Your true self is still there, my brave, brilliant, sarcastic Lily. She's still inside waiting." I opened the wooden box. I showed her the locket, the compass rose, Clara May's journal. I placed it in her hands. "These are from your great-grandmother, Lily," I explained. "She was a fighter, just like you." For a long moment, she held the box. Her empty eyes scanned the contents. Then, almost imperceptibly, a tremor ran through her hand, a fleeting flicker of something. Curiosity? Recognition? In the depths of her vacant gaze, it was barely there, a ghost of a whisper. But it was enough. It was a sign. My Lily was in there, somewhere. The web of deceit, meticulously spun by Elias Vance, was beginning to unravel, thread by painful thread. My fight, I knew, had only just begun. Chapter 6. The faint echo of a laugh. The flicker in Lily's eyes, almost imperceptible, was a lifeline. A tiny crack in the impenetrable wall Whispering Pines had built around her. My heart, which had been in a constant state of agonizing ache, throbbed with a fragile, renewed hope. My Lily, my real Lily, was still in there. I consulted with a renowned child psychologist specializing in deprogramming and trauma recovery, recommended by the legal aid team. Dr. Anya Sharma, a compassionate and sharp woman, emphasized patience, consistency, and a slow, gentle approach. "You can't force it, Sarah," she advised. "You have to create a safe space for her true self to emerge. Reintroduce familiar stimuli. Rebuild trust." We began slowly. I filled the house with things Lily used to love, her favorite music, soft and melodic, playing quietly in the background. Her art supplies, laid out on her desk, paints and brushes waiting. Her beloved collection of graphic novels, placed within easy reach. I cooked her favorite meals, even if she picked at them with robotic precision. I talked to her, not demanding answers, but sharing stories of our past, of her childhood, of funny anecdotes, her defiant acts. her quirky observations. I spoke of her father, David, and his good intentions, his own struggle to understand. I spoke of her friends, of school, of the world outside the camp's carefully constructed reality. Every night, I would sit by her bedside and read to her, not just children's stories, but passages from Clara May's journal, from Liam's letters. I spoke of the strength of our family, the secrets, the resilience, the love that had persevered through generations. I even read her excerpts from Maya's affidavit about the reset and Elias Vance's twisted vision, carefully explaining how he had tried to erase parts of people, just like his father had tried to erase parts of Clara May's life. I watched for any sign of recognition, any shift in her blank stare. One afternoon, I was reading a particularly poignant passage from Clara May's journal about the pain of unspoken love. Lily was sitting rigidly on her bed, her hands clasped in front of her, her gaze fixed on the wall. As I read, my voice soft but filled with emotion, I noticed a tear, slow and deliberate, tracing a path down her cheek. Then another, and another. "Lily?" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. She didn't speak, she didn't move, but the tears flowed, silent, profound. It was the first authentic emotional response I had seen from her since her return. A breakthrough, a profound shift. I stopped reading. I simply sat beside her, allowing her to cry. I held her hand, gently, comforting her with my presence. The rigid posture softened, almost imperceptibly. The dam, holding back weeks of suppressed emotion, was slowly, agonizingly beginning to crack. The following days saw more small changes. She started making eye contact, fleetingly. Her answers, though still rehearsed, occasionally held a hint of something more. A subtle inflection, a question mark where there had been none before. She began to observe her surroundings, her gaze lingering on a familiar photograph, a childhood toy. One evening, I put on her favorite indie rock band. The music filled the quiet house, a vibrant, rebellious sound. I watched her from the doorway of her room. Her head, which had been perfectly still, began to tap almost imperceptibly to the rhythm. Then her foot, and then a tiny, almost imperceptible hum escaped her lips. The melody, her melody. My heart soared. This was it, the real Lily, stirring within. Weeks turned into months. The legal case against Whispering Pines gained momentum. Maya's testimony, combined with Alex's suppressed messages and my own meticulous research into Elias Vance's twisted familial motivations, formed a powerful indictment. Other families, seeing our courage, came forward with their own chilling accounts. The media, drawn to the sensational story of a re-education cult and the prominent Vance family name, picked it up. Elias Vance was arrested, and Whispering Pines was shut down, its insidious practices exposed to the world. Justice, though slow, was finally taking its course. But my focus remained on Lily. Her healing was paramount. Dr. Sharma guided us through the painful process of deprogramming. Lily began to recount fragmented memories of the camp, of the relentless sessions, the cold, emotionless staff, the constant pressure to conform. Her voice, at first flat, slowly regained its inflection, its sarcasm, its vibrant expressiveness. The memories were terrifying, traumatic, but confronting them was a necessary part of reclaiming herself. One ordinary Tuesday evening, almost 6 months after her return, I was in the kitchen, humming along to the radio. I heard a sound from the living room. Not the quiet, polite chuckle, a genuine laugh, a burst of uninhibited, joyous laughter. I rushed in. Lily was on the couch, surrounded by her old graphic novels, a half-eaten bag of chips in her hand, her hair a charming mess. She was laughing, truly laughing, at a ridiculous panel in one of her books. Her eyes, those beautiful, expressive eyes, were filled with warmth, with mischief, with the familiar spark of my daughter. She looked up at me, a wide, uninhibited smile on her face. "Mom," she said, her voice clear, vibrant, filled with her unique inflection, "this is so stupid. Remember when we tried to draw ourselves as superheroes and I made Dad a grumpy squirrel?" My breath hitched. The question, the memory, the genuine, unscripted joy in her eyes. My Lily was back. The empty shell was gone. The silence was finally broken by the most beautiful sound in the world, my daughter's laughter. Tears streamed down my face, tears of relief, of profound gratitude, of overwhelming love. I rushed to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. She hugged me back, fiercely, burying her head in my shoulder. She smelled of her favorite shampoo again and of home. "I love you, Lily," I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. "I love you too, Mom," she whispered, her voice still a little fragile, but completely, undeniably her own. "I really, really missed you." The journey wasn't over. The trauma of Whispering Pines would leave scars. But Lily was fighting, resilient, slowly reclaiming her spirit. She was my daughter, returned from the void, a testament to the enduring power of a mother's love and the unbreakable spirit of a young girl who, against all odds, found her way back to herself. The echoes of the twisted legacy of Elias Vance faded, replaced by the faint, beautiful echo of my daughter's laugh, a sound that promised a future filled with genuine joy, real emotions, and an unwavering belief in her true, resilient self.